Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something wild, unpacking a highly provocative source that claims one single football match completely blew the lid off a massive, incredibly dark global conspiracy. If you thought international sports were just about, what actually happens on the pitch, this analysis is going to completely flip your perspective. We are going to explore a sprawling, frankly mind-bending theory that connects the dots between illicit betting syndicates, high-level geopolitics, and some of the absolute biggest names in world football. And look, this source doesn't pull any punches. Right out of the gate, according to the author's analysis, the shocking Egypt versus Argentina match wasn't just a game. It was an event that exposed a hidden underworld capitalist network that's allegedly pulling the strings of global sports behind the scenes. The argument here is that what fans witnessed that day was basically the mask slipping off a deeply corrupt system, revealing a secret world that's just boiling right under the surface of our everyday reality. Okay, so let's really get into this. To make sense of this complex web, the source says we have to fundamentally change how we watch sports. We need to look right past what they call the visible game. The 22 players, the national pride, the ideals of fair play we all sit down to watch on TV. Instead, we're urged to examine the hidden game. This is an alleged high-stakes shadow operation run by capitalist networks and global betting syndicates, where the actual outcomes of the matches are completely predetermined before the referee even blows the starting whistle. The source frames the ultimate scene of the crime around a very specific match, Egypt versus Argentina. You might remember this one. A totally secure 2-0 Egyptian lead just magically evaporated, turning into a 3-2 loss in under 10 minutes. Now, according to the analysis, this wasn't just a standard defensive collapse or some run-of-the-mill bad refereeing. The claim is that this was a calculated, FIFA-sanctioned punishment. And why? Well, because the Egyptian team had successfully united Arab fans, sparked immense national pride, and the stadium was absolutely packed with flags showing solidarity with Palestine. The source alleges this powerful display of Arab unity deeply threatened hidden geopolitical interests, which triggered a top-down mandate to basically punish the Egyptian team. But if you're sitting there thinking critically about this, you're probably asking yourself, why on earth would global superpowers and elite political networks actually care enough to intervene in a simple soccer game? What is the actual motive for going to the trouble of rigging an international tournament? Well, the source points to a literal $600 billion answer. Specifically, they reference a Forbes report from June 2026 showing $593 billion for the illicit World Cup betting market alone. I mean, it is genuinely hard to wrap your head around a number that massive. We aren't talking about casual fans placing $20 on their favorite team. The true hidden economic power dictating these matches, according to the source, is a staggering $500 billion illicit gambling machine. To really put that staggering sum into perspective for you, the explainer compares this shadow market to the national reserves of major economic powerhouses. Think about this. The illicit World Cup betting market sits at nearly $600 billion. That completely dwarfs the national reserves of Germany, which are around $345 billion, and the UAE at $210 billion. The argument being made here is that an economic force this unbelievably massive has the power to just buy out any sport, any official, and effectively operate as its own shadow global superpower. And this brings us to the incredibly dark side of this betting network. According to the source, this market functions as a giant global laundromat. Using unlicensed crypto apps and the dark web, this money doesn't just quietly sit in a bank somewhere. The source asserts it directly funds horrific crimes, from cartels to exploitation and human trafficking rings, which obviously we unequivocally condemn. But the explainer goes a step further into macroeconomic conspiracy, claiming that laundering this illicit wealth ultimately protects the US dollar. How? By ensuring hundreds of billions in global liquidity are forced to flow right through Western-controlled digital channels, essentially propping up Western economic dominance. So how does all this dark money actually influence the game on the pitch? Well, the source explains the mechanics of global match fixing are surprisingly direct. It's not always about missing a goal on purpose. A lot of it is micro-betting. With the explosion of cryptocurrencies, mafias can bribe players just to deliberately receive a yellow card at a specific minute, or they'll pay off a defender to intentionally cause a penalty kick in the box. Furthermore, the claim is that these networks will actually pay off top-level club managers to just bench their most talented star players, which ensures a team's failure without making it look entirely obvious to the fans. Now, I know, this all sounds exactly like a hard-boiled neo-noir detective thriller. So you might be wondering, does the author actually have any concrete historical evidence that this level of blatant, wide-scale match fixing is realistic? To back it up, the analysis anchors its modern conspiracy theory in historically documented scandals, basically proving that the mechanisms of match fixing have been actively operating for well over a century. The timeline goes all the way back to a 1915 betting ring involving Liverpool and Manchester United. It points to Italy's massive 2006 Calciopoli scandal, where top referees were proven to be manipulated, leading to Juventus actually being stripped of 2 league titles. And crucially, it highlights the very dark reality of the 1994 World Cup, where heavy cartel betting losses tragically led to the assassination of Colombian player Andres Escobar. The author's argument here is pretty simple. If they rigged entire leagues back then, they are definitely rigging them now on an even bigger scale. So the really crucial point is how this scales up globally today. Building on that history of corruption, the source introduces a concept they call functional organizations. According to the analysis, global entities like FIFA, and actually even financial institutions like the IMF, are not the independent bodies we think they are. Instead, they allegedly act as mere tools, almost like geopolitical shell companies, executing the will of these shadowy elite Western capitalist networks. They are, essentially, just the public-facing managers of the hidden game. And the source goes into some deeply controversial territory here. In its most explosive claims, it alleges actual ties between FIFA and Jeffrey Epstein's abhorrent exploitation network, crimes that are, of course, universally condemned. The author also ties this sports manipulation directly to Western geopolitical conflicts in places like Gaza, Sudan, and Libya. Furthermore, the source asserts this crazy, direct link between the pitch and global politics, claiming Argentina's victory was orchestrated as a reward, which resulted in a $32 billion IMF loan strictly because they politically aligned with Israel earlier in the year. With all these massive economic and geopolitical forces supposedly manipulating the world from the shadows, you have to wonder, where exactly does a single player, an icon like Egyptian star Mohamed Salah, fit into this massive global web? Well, according to the analysis, Mohamed Salah is a prime victim of this global mafia precisely because he absolutely refuses to play their game. The source states, and I quote, "Salah refused to be the face of their poisoned henny. He became a target." The argument is that Salah's strict personal discipline, his unshakable morals, and his immense unifying popularity all across the Arab world make him literally impossible for these corrupt networks to control, buy off, or use as a puppet for their own agenda. Get this. The source even points to a highly specific and dramatic conspiracy regarding Liverpool's hiring of Dutch manager Arne Slot back in 2024. The claim is that this hiring was a direct order from these dark networks. According to the author, Slot's only true mandate as manager was to bench Mohamed Salah and just destroy his influence. Salah, however, resisted this intense psychological pressure and targeted harassment, pushing right through to deliver a historic season anyway. And interestingly, the source claims that Slot was abruptly fired just a week after Salah finally announced his departure, supposedly proving that the manager's singular mission was just to drive the Egyptian star out of the club. Despite all this intense, alleged pressure from a $600 billion mafia, the source concludes that Salah remains this incredible symbol of pure resistance. The analysis ends on a really strong note of patriotism, suggesting that the ultimate goal right now is for players and fans to step completely outside of this corrupt Western system. The author argues this is really about using Salah's morals and discipline to rebuild Egyptian football from the ground up, relying on true sportsmanship in the visible game rather than participating in the rigged, heavily bet upon international circuits of the hidden game. So, we've just walked through a sprawling, intense, and deeply provocative theory presented by our source material today. Whether you view this as a total revelation of truth or just a highly complex conspiracy theory, it definitely forces us to ask a very dark, neo-noir question the next time we sit down to turn on a match. Are we cheering for a fair game of football, or are we literally just witnessing the hidden gears of a massive, dark global economy turning right before our eyes? Thank you so much for exploring this with us. Keep questioning what you see,